How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Swan Drop 1000. Today is September 7th, 2021, and today we're going to focus on the 2021 to 2022 winter season and see what type of winter you should expect in each region in the United States. Will you see a snowier and colder winter, or will you see a warmer winter for your region? I'll answer those questions in this video, but before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather calls. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather calls. So let's begin by taking a look at the current Enzo Outlook for the next several months. And as you can see, we are currently in the month of September, and you see over the next several months, the forecast is that we will remain most likely in a La Nina phase with close to a 70%, peaking close to a 70% chance by the month of November. However, you see that later during the winter, you see that the chance significantly drops for La Nina phase occurring during the winter months such as January, and drops below 50% by the time we reach February. And there is a possibility that we could see some variation in the Enzo forecast over the next several months. However, as of right now, it seems like the most likely scenario is that for most of the winter, we will experience a La Nina phase to maybe a neutral phase during the late winter months. That seems like it's the current consensus from the computer models and what the National Weather Service is currently stating. So to see what happens during a La Nina, what this means is that typically the northern United States experiences much cooler than average temperatures throughout the entire northern United States. If we were to take a look what typically happens, you see that during a La Nina phase, we see a significant polar jet stream dip throughout the United States, and that brings a lot of that cold air in the higher latitudes of the Earth further southward, and it brings a lot of that colder and more snowier type air parcels into the United States. So that as a result, that leads to more snowstorms typically, and that leads to a lot more polar vortexes occurring during the winter. So as a result, if we were to experience a La Nina, it'll be you should most likely expect a colder and snowier winter throughout the northern United States, while typically drier winter occurs during a La Nina phase in the southern United States, which includes the southeast and extends all the way to the southwest. And it could be compounded by the fact that the west coast is currently dealing with a very strong drought at this time, and typically droughts take a very long time to go away. So we could see just a very dry winter for a lot of the southern United States, and a cooler than average winter and potentially snowier than average winter in the northern United States if a La Nina phase were to occur. And even if a neutral phase were to occur, you see that a neutral phase isn't that much different from what you'd experience in a La Nina phase, where we still see that noticeable jet stream dip move further southward into the United States, and we see a prominent Pacific jet stream moving through the Pacific Northwest, bringing a lot of troughs and a lot of precipitation to the Pacific Northwest, and we still see warmer than average conditions throughout the southern United States. The only difference is that the colder air shifts a little bit further eastward during the neutral phase, so it's more of the northeast will get involved in the colder and snowier winter, and also the more moist conditions move further southward to the point where they affect the southeast rather than a La Nina phase where it's a little bit more dry. So while there are certainly a lot of similarities between the Enzo and La Nina pattern, they aren't completely similar, and there are still variations in terms of what happens in each region of the United States. So we just have to wait and see. However, currently the most likely scenario is that for majority of the winter, we will see a La Nina phase occur, which would mean that we'll see a colder winter in the northern United States and a drier and potentially warmer winter in the southern United States. To take a look at also we need to take a look at is also the intensities of the La Nina phases, and you see that we have plenty of years where we've experienced a La Nina from 1954 all the way up to 2020, which was the most recent La Nina, which brought a record-breaking hurricane season last year and likely will bring a well above average hurricane season this year. But you see that during all these years, the consensus from the data shows that typically during all these years, I pretty much put pretty much the temperature average of all La Ninas that have occurred from weak to moderate to more bigger La Nina phase, and you see that whether we experience a weak La Nina or a moderate La Nina or a strong La Nina, the consensus is that from the data is that we see cooler than average temperatures throughout the northern United States overall. So it is good to put heavy emphasis on this data because this data goes years back and compiles and synthesizes pretty much years of historical data to back up the fact that it's typically a lot colder in the northern United States during a La Nina phase, and all these years are compared to a long-term average which extends from 1991 all the way to the year 2000, the most recent year 2020. So this is something we certainly need to take seriously because it's pretty much comparing all the La Nina intensities to 30 years of data, which is a very long-term average, as 30 years is more than enough as a reference point to see what type of temperature anomalies you typically experience during a La Nina. So I'd expect that the northern United States should expect a cooler than average year when it comes to temperature anomalies. And you see that for the southern United States, there isn't really a big consensus whether the temperatures will be well above average or below average. However, my gut feeling tells me that typically during a La Nina phase that the southern United States will experience warmer than average conditions, primarily due to the fact that it's going to be a lot drier. So of course, more short wave radiation will hit the surface in the southeast, which will mean that more heat and more energy from the sun hits you guys, which means that the temperatures will warm as a result of the air molecules getting a little bit more energy from that short wave radiation from the sun. So I'd expect a warmer winter during a La Nina phase. However, it could easily go either way because of course, the data doesn't really have a strong correlation when it comes to temperature anomalies, whether it's well above average or below average in the southeast. So it could go either way, but I'd say it'll be warmer than average in the southern United States. Now, taking a look at the precipitation anomaly, which is another big factor in determining what type of conditions you'll experience this winter. And you see that the data from all of the La Nina show that typically the southern United States experiences drier than average conditions, which is part of the reason why I do expect the southeast and the southern United States in general to experience a warmer winter this year. And we see more above average precipitation during a La Nina, where you do see that in the Pacific Northwest, you guys experience well above average precipitation, and it's as a result of a Pacific jet that's moving through the area, which brings a lot of troughs into the Pacific Northwest, which of course brings up the precipitation amount in the Pacific Northwest. So as a result, I do expect it to be drier than average in the southern United States and a lot more moist than average in the Pacific Northwest. And while you see that a lot of the northern United States, which includes northern Midwest and Northeast, are primarily average, or there isn't really a strong correlation to whether or not you'll experience a below average precipitation year or above average precipitation year during La Nina, I'd expect that you will experience more precipitation as a result of a more prominent jet stream dip due to a La Nina. So I'd expect more precipitation in the northern United States overall. But that's not the only thing we need to take a look at when it comes to precipitation and temperature anomalies. We also need to take into account of the computer models or the climatology models, which also predict what will happen within the next couple months. And if we were to go into the winter months, let's say including December, January, and February, we of course see that the Pacific Northwest is a lot more moist than average during it's forecasted to be much more moist than average, which isn't at all out of the ordinary with La Nina. Typically, we do see a lot more moisture in the Pacific Northwest during La Nina. However, we do see drier than average conditions throughout the southern United States, which again isn't a major surprise because that typically happens in during La Nina. However, we see around average precipitation throughout the northern United States, which includes the Great Lakes region, the Northeast, and while there isn't, and while the CFS model currently isn't forecasting much, a lot more drier than average conditions throughout California and the Southwest, I'd expect I expect the drought to continue over there, as I'll show you guys why in just a sec, but I do expect that the CFS model will be correct when it comes to precipitation anomaly, which would put more emphasis on bringing precipitation in the Pacific Northwest and the Southeast. I mean, drier than average conditions in the Southeast. Now, taking a look at the Drought Monitor, which is another thing we need to take into account when forecasting this winter, and you see that for the past several months I've been talking about this drought, and I've really been hoping this drought will go away because, of course, you never want to see a drought as it just causes multitude of negative effects for a certain area. But you see that this drought hasn't gone away. This map is valid as of August 31st, 2021, and the West Coast is still deep in a drought. And the reason why I bring this up is because typically when there's a drought, it's very hard for a drought to go away because when it isn't raining, that means less moisture is in the ground. When less moisture is in the ground, that means there's less moisture. There's less moisture the atmosphere could absorb. And when there's less moisture for the atmosphere to absorb, that means that there's less condensation to occur, and it becomes an endless cycle where there just isn't enough moisture in the atmosphere during a drought, and it's very difficult for it to get out of that cycle. So unless this changes very quickly within the next couple months, I do expect that this drought for a lot of the West Coast to continue. Maybe I still do expect the Pacific Northwest to get out of this drought once we hit winter time, because it seems like all the signs are pointing towards a more moist winter for you guys in the Pacific Northwest, just as a La Nina most likely going to occur, as well as the CFS model agreeing that it's going to be more moist than average in the Pacific Northwest. However, I don't see any signs of the drought slowing down in the south, around southwest region of the United States, which is very unfortunate. But it should. But during the La Nina phase, it's just it typically just brings very dry conditions throughout the southwestern portion of the United States. So I expect the drought to continue at least in the southwestern portion, while the northwest portion. Currently, the forecast, what should happen is that you guys will eventually get out of a drought and experience a more moisture-filled atmosphere during the winter time. We still have yet to see if that will come for fruition because, like I said, it's difficult for a drought to get out of the region. If I were to give a guess, I'd still say that we're going to experience a more moist than average winter in the Pacific Northwest. However, I wouldn't completely bet on it either, since this drought hasn't gone away over the past several months. But now, next thing, look at another big factor that determines what type of winter you'll experience. We also need to take a look at the Arctic Oscillation, because typically during to make a long story short, pretty much during a negative Arctic Oscillation, that pretty much means that the jet stream dips further southward because the westerly winds are weaker because of a weakness in of the Bermuda Azores Ridge, as well as Greenland low pressure system, which means that the westerly winds are weaker, which means that during the negative phase, the cold air is more likely to pretty much meander further southward because the westerly winds are less likely to divert it further eastward eastward rather than southward. So as a result, during the negative phase, we typically see a lot more colder conditions throughout the United States, a lot more snowstorms, as some of the biggest snowstorms of all time occurred during a deep negative Arctic oscillation, while during a positive Arctic oscillation, pretty much the opposite happens. We see less jet stream dips and a more warmer winter overall, and you see that right now we are in the negative phase, and it's really difficult to forecast beyond what will happen with the Arctic oscillation beyond the 2 week mark. But we can sort of at least estimate what type of Arctic oscillation we'll experience during the winter, and also right now during the fall months, it's a big determinant on what type of winter you'll see. Because let's say if we're in a positive Arctic oscillation for the rest of fall, that would mean that cold air will be centered towards Canada, which would mean that Canada would experience more snowstorms, and as a result, a bigger snowpack, which would mean that colder temperatures would eventually occur and pretty much converge in Canada. So when a negative Arctic oscillation hits during the winter, it hits a lot harder because the snowpacks during the fall months in Canada cool down the atmosphere so much that when it moves southward, it's a lot colder than what you typically expect. However, the good news is that right now we're in a negative phase, which means that the cold air won't be centered towards Canada as much, and that would mean less snowstorms overall for Canada during the fall months. So if a negative Arctic oscillation were to hit during the winter in the United States, that would mean that it would be less intense. However, it's still very difficult to forecast the Arctic oscillation exactly. We're just gonna have to wait and see. But a pattern I do notice is that typically when we're either in a positive or negative Arctic oscillation, it typically lasts for at least around an average of like 1 to 2 months. I'd say you see that this positive Arctic oscillation began right around mid-May, and it extended all the way to mid-August. Which, if we were to calculate that would be right around a 3-month period of positive Arctic oscillation. So while it's again difficult to forecast what type of Arctic oscillation phase we'll experience, we could at least estimate that this negative Arctic oscillation will at least last between 1 to 3 months, and by the time it ends, which would be around October to November, that would mean that we'll experience a positive Arctic oscillation to start the winter, which would definitely limit the amount of snowfall in the United States, at least for the early winter. However, I do eventually expect that Arctic oscillation during the late winter to hit, which will mean which is more prominent, more prominently brings snowstorms. So as a result, I still do expect a snowier winter for the northern United States. As here's an image of how the Arctic oscillation looks. You see that we see weaker jet streams, which means that the cold air dips further southward during a negative Arctic oscillation, and a stronger jet stream, which would mean in a positive Arctic oscillation, which would mean that cold air is centered further northward. But taking a look overall now at my complete winter forecast, you're going to see that for a lot of northern United States, I'm expecting it to be much colder than average as a result of La Nina phase, which typically brings a lot cooler than average conditions throughout the northern United States. I expect more nor'easters to be likely because we're going to be in between maybe a La Nina to a neutral phase, which typically brings more jet stream dips to bring those troughs just off the coast of the Northeast. So nor'easters will be likely, I'd say, which would bring colder and snowier conditions to the region, and the prominent jet stream dips will make it an extremely cold and snowy winter, especially for the northern Midwestern states. So I'd prepare for a cold and snowy winter there, and I expect it to be cool and moist in the Pacific Northwest as a result of prevailing Pacific jet moving through, which would bring a lot of troughs to the region, a lot of rain and precipitation, and potentially snow, especially in the higher elevations. However, for However, for this area right here, I expect it to be sort of a winter mix, which means that I think there's going to be phases where it's going to be warmer than average. However, I think there's also going to be phases where it's going to be as cold as, let's say, northern United States, and you could experience some snow there, as I wouldn't rule out that possibility. However, for the southern United States, I expect it to be very warm and very dry for the most part, because that typically is what happens during a La Nina, and especially for the southwestern United States, we typically see we're likely to see that drought continue. So I expect it to be very warm, very dry for that region. So this is my winter forecast for 2021 and 2022. If you want even more in-depth forecast for your area or your city, just comment down below and I'll predict how much snow you should experience in your area. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see more weather content. And I hope you guys have a good day.